hear anything. I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Oh my goodness. Can you hear now? Hello?
I got you if you can hear me.
You guys can hear now?
I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
we're good. Thank you.
I will repeat then for those of you online. We're calling to order our August Sustainability Commission meeting. So welcome. It's good to see you all online. So we will go ahead and proceed to the roll call. And I, Chair Amy Wolkowinski, am here. Vice Chair Mary Metzger. Can you hear Mary?
Yes. Who are you talking to?
Commissioner Metzger. I know when we had a working group, I think we're having some technical difficulties, so I'll move down the roll call. Commissioner Noah Baker.
I'm here if you can hear me.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Kristen Conkle. Here. Commissioner Tom Lammy.
Here.
And Commissioner Roger Skurlock.
Here.
Okay, Commissioner Vice Chair Metzger. Oh, she's raising her hand. I saw that. Oh. Did you hear that?
Second.
You seconded. She can't hear. So we have a quorum. We'll let Vice Chair Metzger. Should we pause for a moment? Is there anything? Are you chatting with her, Tia? Oh. What did she say? My team's just crashed. Oh. Oh no. Luckily, it's still going. Okay. Okay. Well, we will go ahead and move on with the land acknowledgement. Commissioner Conkle, would you please? You got it. Okay.
The Sustainability Commission humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border the mountain sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home.
Thank you. All right, at this time, we're going to move on to public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within their jurisdiction that is not scheduled before the commission today. Due to open meeting laws, the commission cannot discuss or act on items presented during this portion of the agenda. To address the commission on an item that is on the agenda, please use the Teams chat function. Simply type in public comment to indicate to me that you would like to comment. I will then recognize you when it is time for public comment, and staff will unmute your microphone if needed. Do we have public comment on Teams right now? Or in person? Is there anybody on Teams, Tia? Hello.
Hello. So I'm
Welcome.
Ward Davis again, and still talking about recycling.
Hi, Ward.
Hi. But I'll start with the new recycling contract with Friedman Recycling. For starters, they've added polypropylene #5 to their list of acceptable material. We've told everyone to forget about those numbers and just recycle bottles, jugs, and jars. We did that so we wouldn't have to say, we take all #1s and 2s except for thermoforms. If we did that, we'd have to explain thermoforms. Thermoforms are #1s, except they aren't. They're got an extra glycol in them, and you can't, you then mess up all your recycling if you have any of those. We're going to figure that one out. Friedman has added an option in the new contract to reduce shipping costs by better compaction. the little air pockets in corrugated cardboard are difficult to compress away. So they are providing,
I don't think.
so they're providing an option to compact the recycling into bales and be able to increase the tons per truckload from
Hello?
1214 to
Hello?
around.
I can't hear you. Hi. I can't hear you.
Can you message her in the chat to you by Teams? But I will text. I'll try again. Do I have her text? I don't have her number.
I think everyone else hears, so perhaps this person, it's on her end. I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
You can call in using the phone number on the calendar invite.
Commissioner Metzger. Oh, she can't hear. She
Can't hear.
can't hear. Okay. Kristen.
No, Chris is chatting.
Oh, all right. Sorry, Warren.
So, you know, we would be able to increase our size per truckload like 30-40%, which means less loads. And Evan Tyrell, while he was still here, calculated that would save $250,000 a year. But it would require reusing some of the old MRF equipment, or at least some of the location. And solid waste, not too happy about that. So in addition, baling like that is particularly interesting because it provides a starting point for pulling the old cardboard here in Flagstaff and saving a lot on shipping and processing. As far as I know, none of this is being considered. When Norton was in operation, several of us did our monthly first Saturday white paper drop-off. It was mainly an opportunity to talk to people that are doing the drop-off about recycling. And we concluded, it was only a few of us, but we concluded it was fairly effective. We had done it for a couple of years, and we were only once a month. But we think it was helpful. So I was thinking it'd be useful to use the old MRF conference room, which we were working out of, as a recycling information center manned by volunteers. And last, I wanted to point out that we need to give literature and training to the short-term rental people. The people there are, they're here for a day or two. They don't know anything about our recycling rules. I found a full quart of yogurt in a recycling bin last week. It would have contaminated hundreds of pounds of recycling. So my request is still the same. Put recycling on the agenda in every Sustainability Commission meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Anyone else for public comment? Tia? Okay. All right, we will move on to approve the July minutes. Does anybody have a motion to approve?
Motion for the minutes. I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. July minutes are approved. And with that, we'll move on to commission business. Before we dig into our first presentation, we have a lot of really good content to go through together today. I just want to do some brief housekeeping. And what we're dealing with so far today is a perfect example of why we need to do this. I just want to ask everybody to please show up on time, especially, and I almost didn't make it on time today too, but especially until we have our last seat on the commission filled. It's, it's just easiest to make sure we have a quorum and can begin on time if we're all really trying for that. And then in terms of our discussions, it's helpful for those that are attending both online and in the room that don't know us as a commission, and for our lovely minute taker who takes such amazingly detailed minutes every week. If we all speak in turn and request to be acknowledged, and whoever's leading the discussion will then call on people accordingly. And I guess as chair, most of the time that will be me, but not always. So please acknowledge, raise your hand, and we'll acknowledge you to speak. I think those were the main points, just to help us stay organized, help the public and anybody else participating remotely to be able to participate. Did I miss, is there anything we should add to that to you that we discussed? Okay. All right. So moving through the agenda then, I'd like to invite Shelley Gordon, who is the State Director of Arizonans for Community Choice, and Cody Hubin, who is with AZ4CC as a policy advisor, to speak with us about community choice energy.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, commissioners. So how do we want to do this? Tia, are you going to bring up our slides and then we'll,
I can, or you can share your screen.
okay, so I don't use Teams, so how would I do that?
Yeah, so in the upper right-hand corner of the Teams meeting,
Share.
next to the leave button, yeah, click the share. And then you can click on, it's loading for me, basically share your screen.
Or
Or depending on, there's sometimes in the,
it says entire screen. It doesn't even want share. Oh, share screen. Okay, so then it brought up, should I click on entire screen?
try that, sure, yeah.
Okay, so I,
Followed by pound.
sorry, I still don't know how to bring up my slides. Yeah, maybe if you bring them up, it might be easier if you drive, and then I don't want to waste a lot of time on
Thank you.
technology. Can you just bring them up for everybody?
Sure,
People
yeah,
people on
I will try.
the Teams meeting, and then everyone in the room can all see them. Hopefully you have a screen to project them.
You're
We
now
probably should have had a
joining
little
the
tech
meeting.
rehearsal.
You go.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I hear some background noise. I guess if people could mute, because I'm easily distracted. Anyway, as Tia said, or as, I'm sorry, the chair said, I forgot your name.
Chair Wolkowinski, Amy.
Mokulewski, thank you. Okay. As she said, I'm the State Director of Arizonans for Community Choice. I don't know if commissioners have explored this because it was on the agenda, or did, a Google search, what is community choice? Also goes by the name of community choice aggregation. There's other names depending on the state you're living in where it's authorized, but for simplicity and how it's referred to by the grassroots advocates for CCE or for community choice, we'll refer to it as community choice energy. So I'm going to give a quick overview. I hope to be done in less than 10 minutes. And then I'm going to turn it over to Cody Hooven, who actually is a policy advisor to AZ4CC, but she has her own company. That's actually what she does for a living, and she's very good at it. So we're really grateful that she's with us. All right, next slide. So, some of you may be too young to remember this image, but when I was growing up, every, twice a week, there would be these bottles of milk that would magically appear in a milk box outside our back door. Nobody ever asked us if we want skim milk, if we want, we're lactose intolerant. We just got our milk, and that was it. And then we put the empty bottles out, they took them away. And that was essentially the way milk was delivered when I was growing up. So if you look at the next slide, this is what it looks like today. So if you go into, I think this is from Sprouts. If you walk into Sprouts, you will see all kinds of choices. Like I said, if you're lactose intolerant, if you want skim milk, sounds like a little bit, you want your soy milk, if you want almond milk. So there are many choices. And so we are drawing this analogy to our electricity still operates with the old milk delivery model, which is basically you are a captive customer of, in your case, APS. They deliver your power. You don't really have a say in the mix of that power. predominantly gas with some nuclear and a little bit of solar and storage and some wind. And that's it. You don't really have a choice of like, I want a plan that has more solar energy in it. So if you go to the next slide, what we're advocating for is a model which still involves the utility. So we're not talking about, Flagstaff taking over the poles and wires of APS and becoming the municipal utility for residents and businesses there. We're talking about community choice energy, which is essentially taking over the generation portion of what APS does. So it allows cities like Flagstaff and counties like Coconino County to buy or generate energy that then goes to the grid and then gets delivered to your home or business. So utility still does the delivery, maintains the grid, still sends the bills to customers, but there's a line item on your bill that would now say, and I'm just making up this name, Flagstaff Clean Energy. That would be the community choice energy program, and your energy would be coming from that program. So, and then utilities would be compensated for what we call the departing load, because now the city is taking over generation. The city, the CCE, because they're now competing for your business, because you can stay with the utility if you so choose, they have to be able to either compete or lower the rates that you're paying APS. And what is the benefit to the customer? The customer gets local choice of energy plans. So, but the plans are based on, let's say how much renewable energy you want in the mix. So you might be automatically enrolled into a default plan of 50% renewable energy, and then you can opt up. There's probably an increase in cost for that, but that going in, so that's totally choice. And as I said, it's an opt-out model. So customers are automatically opted in. Some customers don't even know they're in a CCE. They get their bill, they see the line item, they pay the bill, but they notice that the cost is probably going to be lower, and there's going to be more green energy, content in their plan. And they can always opt out and stay with APS. That's a real choice. That's the operative word in the CCE model is choice. Next slide. So these are, what we consider the four main benefits. Again, because the CCE has to compete, they typically come in lower than what you're paying the utility for the energy portion of the service. Local energy choice, which I just talked about. And then if there are surplus revenues, all that money goes back into funding local energy programs. So it actually becomes a revenue source for the city. Unlike an investor-owned utility where surplus revenues basically go back to paying shareholders. This is not a private enterprise out to make a profit. This is a community service. So as I said, any surplus revenues fund programs. And then of course, a city forms a CCE because they want more renewable energy in their mix. Flagstaff has a climate action plan. They want to reduce carbon emissions. This is the fastest way to do that. Next slide. So just to kind of, expound on the benefits, to kind of expand on those. Across the country where CCE is authorized, ratepayers are saving anywhere between 2 to 25% on their electricity, sometimes higher. I think in New Hampshire, they're saving at least 26%. As I said, any surplus revenues are reinvested back into the community to fund local energy programs, and there's all kinds of programs. And I'll put something. I don't know if there's a chat function. There must be something like that here, but oh, there it is. I see it. Anyway, I'll put in a link to a website where you'll see all kinds of examples of programs that are being funded, and it's pretty impressive. And then this is energy choice with consumer protection. So this is not a free for all. We're not talking about deregulating as much as restructuring, and where customers are basically working through. It's a city department. You get your water from Flagstaff. You get what other services, garbage. the same thing happens then with energy. So it's a regulated program. So consumers are safe, they're protected. And then, what it shows with CCEs nationwide is that when municipalities aggregate the load of local customers, the electric load, and buy energy in bulk, the result is lower prices, more renewable energy, and the same reliable delivery because APS is delivering the power. So they are still in charge of making sure the grid is always reliable. And then, as I said, customers can opt out if they so choose and stay with their utility. Next slide. So this is a quick, I'm going to put that link in the website, but this is just a quick snapshot of programs that are funded by CCEs. I'll draw your attention to the EV charging stations because I actually had a conversation with the CEO of Peninsula Clean Energy, which is a countywide CCE in California, and they use their surplus revenues to install 2,500 charging stations around the county. This is before the IRA and provisions from that. They also use that surplus revenue to incentivize customers to switch to an electric vehicle. So, I mean, that's the kind of, power that's available through a CCE. So I won't spend much more time on this, but this is just a snapshot of available programs. Next slide. So this is one of the people on our advisory council is Russell Lowe's, and he's a data analyst, and he is very knowledgeable about energy, sometimes to the point where he's so deep in the weeds that we have to pull him back. But you need somebody like that because he will go to the nth degree to make sure that his data is accurate. So he got he looked at the APS 10K report. APS is a public company. They have to file a 10K with the SEC, and they have to break out the percentages of energy that's in their mix. So when comparing, just to boil this down, when comparing a CCE, which eventually, from the cities that we've talked to, they want to be at a much higher percentage of renewable energy in their energy mix, customers would save, in terms of dollars, save about almost $25 a month. In terms of carbon emissions, we're talking about a household, running at about 750 kilowatts a month on average. That changes depending whether you have a cold winter like you do in Flagstaff or a long summer like we do in Phoenix area where I am. It could add up to, if you have 1 million customers, would add up to about 6 million tons of carbon being eliminated from the atmosphere. And then water, this is something that nobody talks much about, but the cost to run, a nuclear power plant, which APS has, gas power plants, the savings on water, because, if we're talking mostly about switching to wind and solar, which use very little water, you're talking about 3 billion gallons of water a year in savings. So the savings is significant. That million customer number is, that's going to vary depending on where the CCE is, but we were, rounding it off just to give this example. So next slide. So across the country, the states that are in dark green are all authorized for, cities and counties to form CCEs. So, we've got red states and blue states, and we actually did a workshop with some of the folks from Ohio to give a talk about, what were the barriers they faced and how did they overcome them, because, there are barriers in red states, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The states in blue, which include Arizona, are there because we have we're pursuing legislation, and we actually had 2 Democratic legislators last year who sponsored a bill. Actually, I should say 2023, not this most recent legislative session. And now we're talking to a Republican senator who's actually in my town. And there's a possibility there that, he's very interested in opening up the market, letting other energy suppliers come in with more renewable energy options. So that's why, why we're there in blue. So these are states that are moving along in terms of trying to enable this in their states. Next slide. So just a quick slide about AZ4CC, and we're building a coalition statewide. So we have probably about half a dozen cities, including Tucson, Phoenix. We know we have some interest from Flagstaff, cities and Pima County, and I'll share a little bit about that conversation from yesterday. So that's one group. We certainly have support from the Northern Arizona Climate Change Alliance. There's a number of people. They've been actually getting petitions signed. I'm very grateful to the folks in Flagstaff, and also Prescott is here, Quad Cities. So, NASCA has been very supportive. And then businesses, we found out last week that the Arizona Technology Council is supportive of CCA and will help us if we get to the point where, we now have legislation and we need that support. And this is, the AZ Tech Council has members like Google and Microsoft, and so the giants. So, that's a good ally. And then, and then we have energy suppliers that would love to do business here. Green Mountain Energy, which is part of a large, actually a gas company out of New Jersey called NRG, but they would like to come here and do business. Calpine, and Cody works with Calpine. So Constellation. So these are big energy suppliers that do business with CCEs and would love to sell renewable energy in Arizona, but are prohibited. So we're trying to change that. And all to lead to, our state elected officials, the state legislature, and the Corporation Commission. So we have briefed all the Corporation Commissioners. We're waiting until after the election, and hopefully we can flip that, because we want more pro-renewable energy commissioners to serve on the commission. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. If you go to the next slide. So I just mentioned that, we have a number of cities. I put Yavapai and Coconino counties and with question marks, hoping that those counties will join us. We did a virtual cities tour. We briefed 14 cities in total. And these are the cities that have expressed interest. I call it the continuum of interest. So there's like curious, want to learn more. We do these CCE workshops periodically, all the way to the city of Tucson, which just hired a consulting firm to study municipal power, CCE, community solar, and I think microgrids. So they're actually now going to start. They're having their first meeting. We know the company that got selected. We're going to work with them and make sure that they fairly represent, because there's a big advocacy group in Tucson as well that wants to see this come to fruition. And Pima County, I guess I'll mention this now. So Pima County is going to, it's got to go through several approvals, but the National Renewable Energy Lab, which studies the renewable energy market, including CCE, they actually issue reports specifically on the CCE market. And they have a program, it's called the C2C. It stands for Clean Energy to Community. And what it does is it allows local governments and, community organizations like NASCA, like, AZ4CC, to work with their experts on different issues that they want to explore. It's funded, it's the Department of Energy, so there's no cost involved from the city. But Pima County is basically submitting a proposal that will say, what is the best energy model for our community? Okay, I'll be done soon. Thank you. Anyway, I can talk a little more about that, but Tia was asking, what is the ask of the commission? We would like Flagstaff to participate in this C2C program to see if CCE would actually benefit Flagstaff. So that's essentially the ask. So, and I mentioned that we're meeting with a legislator, a Republican legislator. So I think I'll go to the next slide and wrap this up, because I want to give Cody a chance to give her talk. She's going to give a case study. So she's going to talk about the CCE in San Diego, because she was at the ground floor of making that happen, and then what it looks like today. So I know that was quick, but I'm going to turn it over to Cody and let her take it home.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here. Can you all hear me okay?
You're a little, it sounds a little muted or something.
I think my volume is fully up, so maybe I'll just talk a little louder. Hopefully that works.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna share. Oh, you have my slides up. Perfect. Okay. As long as you all can see those. So my name is Cody Hooven. I actually do have my own firm called Evolution Affairs with a business partner. But through clients, definitely advise on a variety of folks around the country looking to do big policy initiatives, especially around climate and energy and sustainability. And I will explain more about why I'm in that space as we go through these slides. Go ahead to the next one. So this is a quick case study of San Diego Community Power, which is a CCE formed here, officially formed in 2019 and started serving customers in 2021. This is just a fun intro slide because we were on New York Times acknowledged what a big move it is to move larger cities away from their investor-owned utilities into a CCE. Especially San Diego, which may not seem like it, but was definitely a more conservative city, at least for California. Now a little bit more on the purple side of things, but you know, it was a bigger move for us, and we made this move under a Republican mayor at the time. So next slide, please. Oh, and this is, in the sake of time, I will skip this, but this is from somebody up in Sacramento had sent this to me recently. So this is from 2019. They were tracking it in Sacramento as well, saying, wow, this is exciting that our state, San Diego, really tipped the scales to the state of California now being about half of its customers served by CCE programs. So that was a funny kind of reminiscent moment for us. Go ahead, next. So the rough timeline, this is just as you all think about this program for your city or a group of cities. I get a lot of questions from folks, just the logistics of it. How does it work? How long does it take? All those types of things. So I won't go through this in too much detail, but we started our journey towards this by adopting a climate action plan that was fairly ambitious. And that set some renewable energy goals. Actually, it set a 100% renewable energy goal for the city. And we actually wanted to implement our plan and not just set it on a shelf, and started looking at ways that we can achieve 100% renewable energy over time, of course, not immediately. And started doing some different studies, including a feasibility study for community choice energy. And long story short, it's feasible. It was feasible for us, and the numbers prove that it is actually feasible. We did some detailed studies because of our politics, and we wanted to be extra cautious. We did extra studies. We did a feasibility study and then a business plan before we ever launched. We also chose to go down the route of not doing it as a standalone city, but doing it as a collective of cities. So we actually launched initially with 5 cities banding together under a joint powers agency. And then very quickly we added the county and another city. So we were about half the entire load of our region, jumped right into our CCE once we were formed. We offered it up to everybody, but different cities for different reasons are taking their time or joined another one, those types of things. Once you get that agreement, which, you know, it's no small feat to educate and move forward decisions by city councils to make this happen, then you start a slew of startup activities, securing financing, hiring consultants and staff. It becomes now its own entity. And that's one of the questions we get a lot. Cities are nervous, you know, we don't want to form a new entity and take on debt or liabilities. And there's a lot of ways to shield the local governments from that. And one of the best ways is by starting a new entity that really separates their general funds. They're no longer liable. Fast forwarding further, the first full year of service, we immediately had $56 million in excess revenue. And granted, these numbers are kind of scaled to size somewhat, so in rates and all those things. So every region is different. But just in this last year, they are now at $419 million in cumulative reserves. And we're able to go after some additional state public purpose funding and are just awarded, actually last week or 2 weeks ago, an additional $300 million of state funding through rates to implement local programs, so all sorts of energy efficiency programs in the local region. So that's a whole bunch of revenue that is now being invested back in our region that previously was going to shareholders or going elsewhere. So it's really working. And again, these numbers are not for everybody and not going to shake out the same for everybody, but it's a really good reason to at least study it and see what it could look like for your region. Next slide, please. We also got to do some fun things. You know, this is from an economic development standpoint. A lot of businesses are really interested in this option because rather than having to go through the effort and capital expenditures of installing their own solar and batteries, if they had some sort of goal to be green or some marketing plan or whatever it may be, whatever reason, we had a lot of businesses coming to us saying, this is fantastic. We don't, you know, the utility couldn't offer this to us. Certainly not at a cost competitive rate. So these are just some fun ones that we could show. The San Diego Padres, their whole stadium immediately opted up to a 100% renewable offering, and then use that in some just a blitz of marketing for them, and became the first Major League Baseball stadium in the country to do so. And then Illumina, if you don't know them, they're the company that first sequenced the genome. So kind of cool science and technology coming together there. Next slide, please. So again, these are a little bit in the weeds questions, but a lot of these are questions that you'll get as you talk to different folks in the city staff. So there's kind of a couple of chunks as you're launching a CCA. So you have all this pre-work. You're doing feasibility studies, the city staff or several governments get together. You're looking at your structure. You know, do you want to have a joint powers authority, a standalone? What type of staffing? Immediately you're engaging in the legislative and regulatory space. Those early costs are in the hundreds of thousands ballpark. These are all estimated costs. And those are often paid for by the cities and reimbursed by the CCE once it's formed. The city, when I was with the city of San Diego forming San Diego Community Power, we just tracked all of our expenditures on this effort and paid the city back once we were formed within 2 years with interest. And then there's the next section of startup activities. So now you're kind of your own thing and you need startup capital. So that's in the range of $2 to $4 million. And again, these numbers are ballpark. This comes from going out to the banking industry and getting loans. And they'll initially give you a full offering of funding, but give it to you in tranches or chunks. So the first startup is $2 to $4 million. You hit a few milestones, you hire your staff, you start to engage. And then they give you the next swath, which is really the bigger dollars where you start buying power and getting contracts in place so that you can then onboard customers and start serving them with electricity. Doing a whole bunch of work in the meantime. You're still partnering, as Shelley mentioned, with the investor-owned utility from the billing side and the delivery. It's a whole bunch of technical work in the background. Next slide, please.
Cody, we have about 5 minutes before they're going to.
Yep, I see that. Thank you.
The next item.
One of the things I was really careful to look at and address honestly and openly is risks and mitigations. And maybe I'll skim through this, even though they're really important. But to me, the main point here is that the risks that a CCE would experience are no different than the risks that anybody else in the energy market is experiencing. So the investor-owned utilities, the municipal-owned utilities, they're all experiencing the same risks, and there's a slew of mitigations that a responsible organization can put in place to navigate them. Next slide, please. You'll all have these slides and are free to ask me questions if you need. So what a CCE is and isn't. So from a billing standpoint, customers receive one bill. So a lot of customers don't even know it exists because folks just don't look at their energy bills. You partner with the investor-owned utility, whoever does your billing, to put data on their bill, and customers just receive one bill. Reliability, we get this question a lot. I know it's a big issue in Arizona with your heat. CCEs are held to the exact same standards that anybody else in the market are held to for reliability. They must comply with purchasing and providing the same amount of power and requirements as anybody else. Transmission and distribution, so the lines, the delivery of power, that is still managed by whoever does that currently, municipal or investor-owned utility. Job creation is a big thing. In California, that's a question we get asked a lot. None of the transmission and distribution jobs go away. In fact, because of the increased demand often for renewables, not always, but sometimes there might be an increase in job demands. Rate setting is something that's interesting and different. That is set now at the CCE level in a public meeting. So that is very much unlike how rates are set now, where normal everyday people are not invited to those boardrooms and really hard to get into the ACC meetings to even understand what's going on, let alone weigh in. One of the other bigger things that's kind of buried in here, but I'll just highlight it, is you now have an agency that is a consumer protection agency because they are made up of local staff, local elected officials, and it's a not-for-profit public entity. They have to advocate for consumers and not for investors. And that is a huge thing that often gets overlooked. They now have the funding to actually engage in the regulatory arena, where individual advocates just don't have that capacity or expertise on a bigger scale to have any sort of successes there. Next slide, please. Sorry, I'm trying to go very quickly, but zooming a lot of information. And this is interesting. This is a really small map, but it's online, and I have the link to it at the end. But there's a lot of clean energy built up. There's a lot happening in Arizona as well. So there's tons of energy being developed out there. And I think for Arizona, if you're not using it locally, others are buying it from you. So there's a lot of opportunity for economic development in your state. And as you can see in California, it's just exploding, and that's really good for our economy. Next slide, please. And I see a question here. This is just showing that rates are, you can see the utility rates in the blue and then some other CCE rates down below. This is from New Hampshire most recently. And the gist here is that rates have been lower for even that CCE in New Hampshire. So not to use all California numbers here. Next slide, please. So kind of the nuts and bolts.
Cody, do you want to answer Vicky's question?
Yeah, I'll get, if that's okay, I'll get to it after I finish this slide. I can see it.
Okay.
So the nuts and bolts for Arizona, I think what I would say here is thinking about just pushing to study it. I think that's the next step for anybody that has questions. You just got to study it and understand, like, do we have get our data, get our energy loads, get our rates, and do some number crunching and see what it looks like for you all. There's no reason not to at least take that step. Something that Shelley and others are working really hard on is you would need legislation and regulation in order to move forward with forming. There's nothing to prevent you from actually studying it and understanding the opportunities for your cities, for the state. And really determining your reasons why. That's going to become really important. Is it for clean energy? Is it for local control? Is it for affordability? Really understanding what's most important to your city and kind of leading with that. Next slide, please. And this is just resources, so I'll leave you with this. You're welcome to share this slide, and I'll address this question quickly. The board is comprised of local elected officials. So each agency that joins, they get to select out of their, whatever it may be, city council or board of supervisors, one representative to sit on the board of the CCE. Some CCEs have a board like that, and also maybe a technical committee that most of the decisions funnel up through and just provide recommendations to the full board. That's the end of my presentation. If you'd like to take more time, I'm happy to answer any questions, or I'm available over email if you have any further questions.
Thank you so much, Cody. That was really informative. We're over time and we have a packed agenda. I have a lot of questions. If anybody would like to ask a question, or if you want to answer the question that was in the chat, I didn't see that question, so maybe that would be appropriate. And then And then if Shelley, if you would like to follow up by email with your ask for the commission, I'm
Sure,
really
sure.
interested in all this. This is,
Okay.
Commissioner.
Yeah, if you want to write up your questions, send, have Tia, you can email them to me. We'll get them answered and I will, including explaining the C2C program and what the opportunity is.
Fantastic. Commissioner Lammy, you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a quick question because I think this is all regulated in Arizona at the state level. So where do you see the city having a role in it? I mean, because it's a corporation commission that dictates this. It's a regulate. I mean, we have to deregulate. It's a mess. And I didn't know the city could play a role particularly.
Well, what we're looking for is for cities to advocate for this, in addition to grassroots volunteers like, members of NASCA that are here. And I can talk more about that. I mean, I know you have a tight agenda, but I can answer that in the email, but there's definitely a role for cities and counties to play because legislators, they need to know that constituents want this and then they'll push for it. And, California has an interesting hybrid model where they still have the investor-owned utilities and then they have CCEs. They don't actually have direct retail. They tried that and didn't work out. So, there's different ways to cut at this. But as Cody said, what we want to have happen is let's study this. Let's see how it would work in Arizona. There are 16 states that have restructured their markets and customers are paying less for their energy and they're getting more choice. So we want to bring that to Arizona. And, we're in this for the long game. And so yes, it would require some restructuring, but, there's already.
Cities advocate for legislation all the time if it's in their best interest.
Yeah. So that's the basic answer to your question, but it's, it's something that, we're working on. We've been working on this for a while and like I said, we're in it for the long game, but we already have advocates in the legislature. So, and then, we're working with an energy attorney and, we're actually working on a bill right now. And they already told us what they want us to change. So we are making some progress, but that's the first step.
Thank you.
Great question, Tom. That's one of the fundamental things that has to be addressed for this. And I see our sustainability director, Nicole Antonopoulos, has her hand raised.
Hey, good afternoon. Apologies, I am making my way back from Phoenix from a meeting, but thank you so much, Shelley and Cody. Again, apologize that I'm in transit. I believe that Tia was kind enough to send the commission a element of our carbon neutrality plan goals, as well as the city councils, both their state and federal legislative priorities for this year. Just as a side note, and I think this will help for when Shelley's answering questions that the commission may have, and I have a few I'd love to throw in there too, if you don't mind, Shelley.
Sure.
But we've obviously been monitoring and engaged with trying to move legislation both forward for CCEs and for property assessed clean energy for the last 15 years in the state of Arizona. The city will only really work through the League of Cities and Towns in for the representation at the legislature. So there's another element that creates an additional challenge of where Flagstaff as a government entity, how it operates and its legislative priorities. And so for the commission, I think it would be really helpful and beneficial to ask our public affairs director to visit with the commission for a short presentation on what that legislative agenda looks like and how it plays out every year. Because to Shelley's point and Cody's point, and I think the commission picked up on this very quickly, this is a very complicated, but also not that complicated initiative. There are a lot of moving parts. If you break them down, I think individually they're not as complicated, but putting them all together and the timing and all of that. So just for information for the commission, I think it would be helpful, and we can chat about that at the end of the meeting for a future agenda if that's of interest, but just to put all of this into context for the commissioners. Thanks so much, Shelley and Cody. And
Thank you.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. That's really insightful, and I would love to learn about our legislative priorities and how that works in Flagstaff. So yeah, thank you.
And they are in the executive summary of the agenda item if you want to see them in the meantime.
Yes, I saw that.
Legislative priorities? Okay.
Thank you so much, Shelley and Cody, for presenting. Appreciate your time and the information, and we'll be in touch by email with our questions. Tia will
Great.
help us compile everything, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Me too. Thanks so much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you all for the time.
Bye-bye.
All right. Next up on our agenda is Genevieve Pear3.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Amy.
Hi, Genevieve. Genevieve is a resilience analyst with our sustainability office, and she's going to talk to us about the ADU model plan program.
Thanks, Amy. And thanks to the Sustainability Commission for having me today. I will keep this brief because I know we have quite the agenda. And as I was looking at my slides, I realized there are a lack of pictures. So apologies in advance. I'll try to keep this interesting and go through. But basically, I just want to let the Commission know what we're proposing to do with this project, as well as provide an opportunity to ask questions or make comments and maybe see if one of y'all would like to get involved. So let me... I'm going to turn my camera off while I'm presenting so I don't awkwardly look at a different screen. And then let me share my presentation right now. Just a minute. Okay. All right, let's see here. Okay. So here we go. So just a brief outline, I'm going to talk about what accessory dwelling units are and how they relate to our adopted housing and climate goals for the city of Flagstaff. I'll talk about background research, what we learned, why we are where we are, what we're proposing to do, some of the things we're still figuring out, our next steps, and then provide an opportunity for questions and comments at the end. So basically an accessory dwelling unit is a second and complete living space on a property that already has a single family home. So sometimes they're called casitas. I've heard them called granny flats, mother-in-law suites. There's lots of kind of different names for them, but basically they're kind of a smaller dwelling unit on a lot that has a single family home. There's 3 different types that we have in our zoning code in Flagstaff. So we have detached ones, which are basically their own standalone little mini house, but then also attached, kind of stuck on the side of an existing house. And then integral, and this will be like if it was in a basement or kind of inside the main structure of the house. What I'm focusing on today are these detached ones. And so basically the benefits of ADUs, they're in existing neighborhoods with existing access to transportation and infrastructure. They can provide supplemental income to owners. They tend to be smaller, so they're in a main home, so they're more affordable, both for the rent and utility costs. So really great housing option for folks that might not want a big single family home. So it's really a really good thing to have to increase density and provide more housing choice for residents. And then one last thing is they help create a potential for improved social connections between residents. So lots of benefits of accessory dwelling units. As such, they're important parts of both the 10-year housing plan as well as the carbon neutrality plan. So both of those state the city's adopted housing and climate goals. And they both have the goal to create housing options for households at all income levels and family sizes occupied by local residents. So for the carbon neutrality plan, they're a big part of the decreased dependence on cars target area. And so one of them is just the DD-1.1 is to incorporate flexibility and density into neighborhoods, including accessory dwelling units, to kind of provide more diverse and attainable housing opportunities, as well as decrease travel distances and allow people to live in neighborhoods maybe closer to where they work or where they have fun. And then another goal is to specifically encourage the rapid development of carbon neutral accessory dwelling units. to increase the housing stock, and then a specific goal to incentivize the creation of more affordable units through different programs and mechanisms. And then in the housing plan, there's a goal to make pre-approved standard plans available to property owners to reduce planning and review costs, to again increase the number of housing units in Flagstaff and address our housing crisis, as well as construct and promote net zero ready units, and then as well as update our code regulating accessory dwelling units. And that is peripheral to what we're talking about today, but I just bring that up as just kind of acknowledge that ADUs are an important part of addressing our housing and climate emergencies. So just before I talk about what we're proposing to do, just want to do a tiny bit of information on background research. This was in the presentation provided with the agenda, so I won't go into it in too much detail. But basically, we did a community survey. We got 350 responses, which was great, from lots of different folks in the Flagstaff community about their thoughts on ADUs and what we could do to make it easier to build one. We also surveyed design and construction professionals who are experts in this field and conducted some in-depth interviews with them, and then did online research and interviews with other cities and counties who have adopted pre-approved planned programs. So kind of learn from them and see what they did. So what we found in our survey research is that there are quite a few barriers to building ADUs, because our whole goal is to get more ADUs in Flagstaff. So what are the barriers and then how can we address them? So there are quite a few barriers, but there are several that an ADU model plans library could help alleviate. And those are the ones in that green box in the middle of the screen. Is the cost of designing an ADU, basically drafting plans, finding a designer to build an ADU, and then navigating the city design and permitting process, and then city permitting fees. So I'll talk a little bit later about how an ADU model plans library could help alleviate these four barriers to building ADUs that folks identified in these surveys and basically make it easier to build an ADU. So again, I won't go into this in too much detail because it was in the PowerPoint in the agenda, but basically these are just some important findings that kind of support the development of an ADU model plans library and the importance of ADUs both to current folks who own them and help them cover their housing costs, as well as help address the housing crisis. And I think the middle bullet point is a big one that says 50% of the people who responded who owned a single family home said they're interested in building an ADU. They don't have one already, but only 14% said they might actually build one. So it's like, how can we, make the folks who think they might actually build one be more likely to, right? And they said that they thought model plans would make it easier to build an ADU. So that kind of helps support the direction we'd like to go. And then just from design professionals, since they work in this field all the time, there was support for this because it would benefit design professionals as well as the Flagstaff community. And the one point I'd like to highlight is through these interviews, we talked about ADUs and being, incorporating sustainability features such as all electric and energy efficient construction. And there was a lot of support from these folks for requiring those features through this model plans library because of their small size. And just it's a lot harder to design a small living space if you're plumbing natural gas to it. There's also obviously the health and safety feature concerns and climate concerns with natural gas and the cost savings you get from not using it. So there was a lot of support for designing these to be all electric and energy efficient. So that's definitely something we're going to be pursuing as we finalize our design requirements for this plans library. So that's some of the background research. So basically our goal, as I mentioned many, many times, is that we want to create an ADU model plans library to host a growing inventory of pre-approved all-electric and energy-efficient ADU model plans. A secondary goal is to increase awareness of ADUs and their benefits to the Flagstaff community, and then ultimately increase ADUs in Flagstaff by increasing, make this housing option more available to Flagstaff residents by simplifying the process and reducing the cost to design and permit ADUs. And then also kind of create a resource that to connect homeowners with design professionals and other ADU resources. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of benefits both to the community and designers. So so basically for the community, the design costs should be lower and more predictable. The building permit review fee should also be lower and more predictable. Public can preview plans for free, make it easier to find a designer. We can also require plans to be, again, all electric and energy efficient to help us meet our climate goals, as well as reduce utility costs for people who are living in the ADUs. So really ultimately make it easier and cheaper to build an ADU in Flagstaff and increase the number of ADUs available. But then there's also a lot of benefits to the design community. So they benefit from using the plans they've already created in different locations, retaining ownership of their plans, but being compensated when the plans are used. And that compensation covers working with clients to make sure that they fit on a site, and as well as walk them through the building permit process. And also just a lower time commitment. So they ideally, a designer could work with more clients and get more ADUs out in Flagstaff. So that's really what we're trying to do. So I mentioned model plans libraries. A bunch of cities have done this. In Tucson, they have the best example in Arizona, so I'm going to talk about that. But this is a fairly common tool that cities and municipalities are starting to use to address housing concerns across the United States and make it easier to get more housing units in their communities. So here's the city of Tucson's Casitas Model Plan Library. It's pretty cool. So basically the public can go on the library, they can look at these plans. When you click on them, they provide renderings and floor plans. And so the public can say, hey, like, I like this plan, I'm going to contact this designer. And they work with the designer and then go through that building permit review and approval process and get their ADU built. So we're following in the footsteps of Tucson. They have a great model that we can learn from. And so we're hoping to do something like that here in Flagstaff. So our next steps, we have some things we're still figuring out. We've done a lot of work, but there's still a lot more to do in terms of finalizing our desired design requirements, selection criteria process. We've kind of got overall ideas, but again, we got to work through the nuts and bolts. But ideally, we want to get to the point later this year where we invite design and construction professionals to submit detached ADU designs, likely through a request for informal proposals, where they would submit floor plans or images of what the ADU would look like. And then the designs would be selected by a selection committee comprised of design and construction professionals, community partners, and city staff. And the winners who are selected would then be asked to submit full building construction plans for pre-approval. Once those got pre-approved, to make sure they comply with our building code and any other requirements, they would be uploaded into the pre-approved ADU model plans library. And once that was live, the public would be able to go online and view them, select the plans, work with the designer to make sure it fits on their site, and then submit a building permit application to use the plans. And then our last step would be program evaluation, because this is a pilot program. So we're trying something out. As I mentioned, a lot of cities have done this, but we have to figure out what works in Flagstaff. So hopefully all the research and connections that we've made so far will really help with that. But we will evaluate at the end and figure out, okay, what are our next steps? What worked? What could we change, et cetera? So it's kind of our overarching process. And again, I mentioned we have a couple pending topics that we are figuring out, but we'll need some feedback from our internal partners within the city. So I don't think I mentioned this previously, but we are working very closely with our community development department, primarily with building safety, housing, and planning. But we also need feedback from external folks who are interested in this topic and who know about this. So these are some of the things we're still figuring out. So what I'd like to do, I'm in the process of starting to ask people to be on a selection committee to help select those winning ADU model plans designs that will come out of that request for formal proposals later this year. But in between now and then, also provide some feedback and help with program development. So there would be a couple meetings, some back and forth via email, as well as the need to prepare for the meetings. And then we'll probably have a meeting in 2025 sometime to kind of do that program evaluation that I mentioned. So it's not a huge time commitment, but if anyone from the Sustainability Commission is interested in volunteering to kind of help us develop this program, as well as participate in selecting the winning plans, that would be wonderful. And that's my ask for today, to see if anyone's interested. You don't have to answer today unless anyone wants to jump up and volunteer. But I also want to provide an opportunity for questions or comments. And if no one knows if they want to volunteer today, you're welcome to email me later on. And if you do have any further questions or comments, you can always contact me. I have my email address right here. But if anyone has anything they want to share or want to volunteer to participate, I'm happy to take your questions, comments, and thoughts right now. Thank you.
Genevieve, thank you for the fantastic presentation. I'd love to participate in that. I am a Flagstaff resident who has been thinking a lot about ADUs and how we could possibly incorporate that into our property and our model. And I also, from my work in sustainability, know that compact mixed-use development is one of the best things we can do. So I'm, yeah, really interested in participating.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Appreciate it. I'll be in touch.
Genevieve.
Commissioner Conkle. Thanks. I have a question. Will there be any incentives for homeowners to develop an ADU as a long or medium term rental versus as a short term rental?
Good question. That is something we are considering, but I don't have an answer to. That is something that the survey, that community survey I mentioned, did ask questions like what would incentivize someone to rent it long term versus short term. So that's on the radar. I don't have an answer for you yet, but that's definitely something that we're kind of looking into different options. I think, yeah, we got a lot of feedback from folks in the survey that it seems like the same ADU sometimes is used long-term, while also short-term. It's not like, it doesn't, in a lot of cases, it's not like one or the other. They kind of switch back and forth depending on the needs of the homeowner. So I think, and again, the ADUs help cover housing costs. So that's a tricky issue, but definitely something we're looking into and trying to figure out, what can we do again to create more places for permanent, like long-term residents to live and help homeowners cover costs. So I don't have a firm answer for you yet, but that is on our radar.
Thanks. Really good question.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Commissioner Metzger had a question.
Okay. Commissioner Metzger? You have a question?
My question, it's in a message.
Can you see it, Genevieve?
Oh, yes, kitchens. Yeah, that is an interesting. So there is a new state law that doesn't allow city code to require on ADUs to require kitchens. But because we're setting parameters for what we're looking for these ADU model plans, we have some ability to decide what we want to require. And I assume that we'll want a kitchen. So in terms of a common restriction, there is a new state law that goes into effect by January 1st, 2025. And that is one thing in there that city code can't require kitchens anymore or ADUs. But again, plans are more like an incentive, like we're trying to make it easier. So it's kind of separate from city code. So we can require a kitchen if we want to.
I have one more question. You said the presentation that you gave was focused on detached ADUs. And one of the things you mentioned was possibly requiring, the all electric and energy efficient construction of the ADUs. Is that something that can also be implemented as a requirement for connected or internal ADUs?
Yeah, good question. So I'm going to pull up my presentation one more time. It's really, whoopsies, I did my slideshow before I shared my screen. Hold on just a sec. So we can only do pre-approved model plans for detached ADUs. So any ADUs that are inside or connected to a house require those custom plans. So basically the architect has to go in or designer draftsperson has to go in and create new plans specifically for that site in order to connect to the house. Or if they're doing a renovation for an interior ADU, which would be like this one, so they're converting an attic or a basement into an ADU, that also has to be custom plans. So it gets a lot trickier with these attached and interior ADUs, but the detached ones, they're on their own. You could create a plan that you say, I know this meets our building code and any other relevant design standards. And now when a member of the public just wants to use this, all we have to look for is like, does it meet setbacks? Does it work as a lot, flat enough or something like that to accommodate it? And so that's why we can focus on detached ADUs. So yeah, the other ones get really complicated. So we're not messing with those right now and just focusing on the detached ones.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. just wondering, I like the thought of the requiring electric. Commissioner Lammy, you have a question?
Yeah, are you guys considering any, off-site built ones and just transport it to the site as opposed to just building on-site? There's a lot of tiny home versions out
Mhm.
there. Portable.
Yeah, that is something definitely that when we need to figure out our design criteria and if we're going to have different categories. Tucson had a low cost option where they talked about prefabricated ADUs. I don't know if they had like the prefab tiny homes, but there's kind of those modular ones where you kind of just set them up, and it is cheaper than stick-built construction. So that's one of the things that we need to figure out, how would we do that here in Flagstaff? But I definitely think that's something we want to think about because, going back to those surveys, construction costs, the community and design professionals overwhelmingly said construction cost was the highest barrier to building an ADU. So if we do have a lower cost option, that could address that somewhat. I think we'd have to figure out how we verify that and how we verify that it's lower cost. But there definitely are other construction types beyond just stick built. We just have to make sure they meet building code. And if they're really, really small, it's really harder to meet building code, but it definitely can be done. So that's on the radar. It's just one of those, again, things that we got to figure out. And we will. And again, Tucson is a good example of that. And I see in the chat, Mary Ellen Metzger trailers. So they wouldn't qualify. We only allow, they're not actually permanent dwelling units. So trailers aren't eligible to be considered ADUs. But modular structures that are on a permanent foundation and meet building code, they do. But trailers don't actually meet building code, so they don't count as ADUs. But thank you for the questions.
Other questions? Great.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, Amy, I'll be in touch. Thank you.
All right. Look forward to it.
All right, thanks for having me. Take care.
Okay, next up on our agenda, we have Natalie Pearson, the Food Systems Coordinator from the Sustainability Division. And she's going to talk to us about the Northern Arizona Community Food Systems Assessment. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you all for having me.
Yeah. You'll need to pull up a presentation.
Tia is helping.
Okay.
But yeah, as Tia gets that going, as Amy just said, my name is Natalie Pearson. I work with the Sustainability Office as a food systems coordinator. I started full-time in April, so I'm still in my first 6 months, but really loving this work and excited to be here sharing this amazing assessment and report with you all today. And just for context, this is part of a USDA grant that was given to us in 2023. I'll go into more details in just a moment, but this is a really exciting assessment that goes into a deep dive on the status of our local food systems and provides information on ability to assess gaps and how we can work to improve it. So kind of overview of what we'll be going over today is what does a food system look like? What does our food system look like, going into the project background of that grant I just mentioned, the project timeline and how long this project will be going and where we were at on that timeline. And then I will dive into the report, some of those key findings, which also includes a little bit of an extension speaking to food insecurity in Northern Arizona. And then we can finish off with some questions, and I'll share my contact info if you ever want to reach out in the future. All right, so what is a food system? It's really just how our food gets from the farm to our table and everything in between where it goes after it leaves. And so everything from growing and foraging to the processing, the distribution, retailing, marketing, and then the preparation, the cooking, when you're actually eating it, and then everything that comes after that, where does it go when you're done? What are the safety rules around it? What are we doing for land, water stewardship, and environmental preservation? And so really entwined in our food system is education, equity, and sustainability. It is a very intersectional field where it mixes with a lot of different things: housing, income, education, so many different things, which we will see a lot more of later. But it's very broad. It touches on a lot of different things. And so this report will it's kind of surface level, where there are a lot more things that we could dive into, but that would take a long time. So feel free to reach out later if you have any questions, and I'll make sure I share the report with you all later. So really, the USDA grant project that I just mentioned, it was a $184,000 something grant awarded to us in 2023 for a 3-year project, assessing and growing a sustainable community food system. And what we really wanted to do with this is to provide primary and secondary food systems research across the 5 northernmost counties of Arizona, so that we could support community involvement of Flagstaff climate goals related to sustainable and localized food access and distribution, and also looking to determining the city's food systems commitments over the next goal, and what we can use from this assessment to inform and engage decision makers, key stakeholders, and the community when it comes to future policy around food systems. And so, what is a community food system? What do I mean when I say food action plan and policy? So community food systems assessment is really just a comprehensive tool that is used to identify assets and barriers for a community's food systems. We're looking at the gaps. We're seeing what is preventing people from getting healthy, nutritious food. How are people getting their food? What are we doing with our food waste? What are we growing? And all of this is to develop a food action plan in the future, so we can create a roadmap for an equitable, sustainable, and resilient local food system that supports healthy and vibrant communities. That is the main goal with all of this. And so this is what our timeline looks like. We just wrapped up year 1, which was collecting and synthesizing food access, distribution, and agricultural data across northern Arizona. And we worked with a lot of amazing partners to do this. We conducted a survey that had more than 1,000 responses from the community, had more than 30 interviews with different stakeholders and community members to build this assessment and get a lot of community wisdom and thought that went into it. And now big partners in that were New Venture Advisors, which were our contractors that helped to develop the plan, as well as Flagstaff Food Link was a huge contributor to this as well. And now we're moving into goal 2 and year 2, which is to present the findings of this community food systems assessment, such as today, to stakeholders and community members, as well as looking into opportunities for building infrastructure to start addressing these gaps. And then next year, we'll move on to goal 3. Pinnacle Prevention has been a really wonderful partner to help us facilitate community conversations and engage the community with our second goal in year 2, and they will be sharing that information with our contractors, New Venture Advisors, to start building a food action plan, which is to help guide city policy and programming. Hopefully we can incorporate this into the carbon neutrality plan, and there's already work underway to incorporate findings from this assessment into the regional plan for 2045. Next slide. Sorry. Okay, so diving into the report, it is made up of 6 different sections that I'll move through today. The first of which is really looking at our infrastructure and local food channels, what we are growing and trends related to that. And so I'm sharing with you some of the trends and challenges sections, which really just have a lot of the key takeaways and main points of interest that we want to focus on with policy. And so the first of that is noting that local direct-to-consumer food sales in the region are growing, which is really exciting and a strong indicator of regional demand for local foods. A lot of people would prefer to eat locally if they have the ability to do so. However, because of the small size of farms, there's a lack of business development resources and sales outlet. It's very difficult for these initiatives to grow, and the agricultural economy here in northern Arizona is kind of stuck. It can't really grow much further. And the fact that our agricultural economy up here in Flagstaff is very separated from the agricultural world down in southern Arizona and the valley. We're really limited with the reach of businesses, where businesses in the valley are struggling to get up here and businesses in Flagstaff and northern Arizona are struggling to support the valley. Not to mention that producing food is challenging. Up here in Flagstaff, farmers, ranchers, and gardeners that we surveyed noted climate variability, water access, cost of land, and distance to the markets as key challenges. But as a result of these challenges and barriers, we're seeing a lot of people really come together and collaborate in really beautiful ways. And there's a really strong desire to continue to do this. And so continuing to foster this collaboration and give people opportunities to do so is going to be really important. Another really important keynote is that most of the producers in northern Arizona are Native American, and cultural differences around agricultural activities are actually resulting to an undercount of the local food production, of food sales and economic impact. And there's a lot of what they're doing isn't really tracked. And that's because it's mostly subsistence, and they're not growing the food to sell, they're growing it to share with their families and their neighbors and their communities, which is really beautiful to see. Next slide. So here is a map of local food channels of northern Arizona. So you'll see there's a bunch of different colored little pins and different colored counties. And so the different colors of the counties is the percent of farmers and ranchers selling directly to consumers. So the darker the color, the more they're selling. And so you can see there's a lot of farmers and ranchers selling directly to consumers in Mojave and Yavapai County, and not so much in Coconino or Navajo, and even less in Apache. And a part of that is because they have a lot more local food channels to do so. It is far more limited, where there's almost just about nothing in Apache County and very little in Coconino and Navajo County. And so all of the red pins are farmers markets, and all of the yellow pins are CSA enterprises or food hubs. And so there's a bunch of different percentages that you can see here. 9.5% of farmers are selling to consumers in Mojave, 7.4 in Yavapai, and then it drops down to 1.8 in Coconino, and 1.8 in Navajo, and 1.5 in Apache. And so what this really shows us is that we don't have enough places for farmers to sell their food, and transportation and distribution is definitely an issue. Next slide. And then this is a map we made of some of the more notable community gardens in the community. And so there's a lot of different colors and circles here too. And so each of these little leaves are different main community gardens that are open to the public. It doesn't incorporate all of our gardens, and it's with data as of late 2022, early 2023. But as you can see, there's each of these circles is a half-mile walking radius. And so there's a lot of areas in Flagstaff that aren't within that walking radius to reach a community garden. There are a few bus stops that are within these, but not quite as much in Southside, or Southside, not Southside, Sunnyside. And let's see what else. The colors in the background are the percentage of households with low income, of less than 185% of poverty level. And so the darker the color there, the more low income individuals that are there. So as you can see, there's a lot of folks over here and here and in this whole area that could use access to community gardens, but don't have as good access as others who are in wealthier areas. Next slide. So looking now into food system infrastructure. And so this is what we're processing, what we're growing, and any challenges related to that. So the lack of processing, so meat processing, commercial kitchen space outside of city centers is really limiting food producers' abilities to expand their production and sales. The current lack of distribution infrastructure or food hubs has led businesses to collaborate more, kind of like I was touching on earlier, where they're sharing deliveries, they're building on-farm processing, and they're contracting directly with farmers. So there's a lot of catering company connected with farmer or restaurant connected with farmer versus anyone who could help with distribution in between. And the distance between food producers and resources, so kitchens, processing, storage, customers, all of that is a significant barrier as well to even starting and growing a business in the region. So there's really a need for increased funding opportunities to really support this business development so we can create spaces for these local farmers and producers to grow and can help distribute the food that they're growing to community members who need it. Next slide. So this is a map of food system infrastructure in Arizona. All of the blue are meat, poultry facilities, and the orange are eggs, the red are bakeries, yellows are warehouses, and greens are shared missionary kitchens. There's only 3. And so what this really does to show us is that Flagstaff is really a key center for a lot of these, and there's nothing up here where a lot of our local rural farmers are growing, or nothing in here or here. So they have to travel very far distances to access any of these resources. Next slide. So now into food retail. What are we selling? Who is selling? And so food stores are really concentrated near urban and suburban centers like Flagstaff, with fewer options in more rural areas of the region. And so communities living on Native American reservation lands have very few stores to buy from. And the stores that they do have offer very limited food options. And the lack of local food outlets and food distribution for local food has led to direct purchasing from farms by restaurants and businesses who really, really want to sell this, but there aren't very many other avenues to do so. Many surveyed respondents also noted that the high cost of food is a huge challenge for many in the region, and that locally grown food is perceived as being especially expensive and hard to access. So how do we change this so that locally grown food can be accessible to everyone? Next slide. And so here is another map of food retail locations in Flagstaff. The lighter green, the box shows the city of Flagstaff boundary, and the bluer section are the low income, low access areas again. And so all of the yellows are supermarkets and grocery stores. The pinks are farmers markets, and the red are convenience stores. And so as you can see in the Sunnyside neighborhood, it's mostly convenience stores, and they don't have as much access to the big box stores as other parts of the community. Next slide. So food consumption and health. A big trend was noting that parts of northern Arizona are really lacking access to healthy food. Residents are struggling to meet the recommended intakes of fruits and vegetables, and this lack of access to healthy food is particularly acute in more rural areas and on reservation lands. And this lack of healthy food is creating negative health impacts like obesity and diabetes and lower life expectancy. In fact, 3 of the 5 counties in northern Arizona ranked the least healthiest amongst the entire state. And a part of why this is happening is because affordability of healthy food is such a key barrier, as well as the rising cost of housing, which y'all were just talking about. In the region makes it even more difficult for families to afford healthy food. Often paying rent will come before food. So that is a huge barrier that we're seeing. Next slide. And now food waste and recovery. And unfortunately, Arizona is ranked #1 in the country for producing food waste. And so Flagstaff has created a lot of smaller initiatives to support the reduction of food waste, but those smaller initiatives can only get so far. But they are making an impact where they're decreasing food waste at household, corporate, university, and municipal levels through smaller composting facilities and food recovery initiatives. And a lot of why we're creating so much food waste is there's confusion about health codes, about inspections, about zoning. There are a lot of zoning processes around compost that are really restrictive to developing more composting facilities. And so there are a lot of residents and businesses that are looking to manage their food waste, but aren't sure how, and the resources and infrastructure aren't really there to support them in that. And we do have a leader in food recovery at Northern Arizona University. They have a food recovery network where they're recovering food from their campus diving. And donating it to Sunshine Rescue Mission, but are struggling with capacity and growing that. So how do we do more of that where we can recover hot food from restaurants and caterers, as this still poses a logistical challenge. Next slide. And last but not least, access to food. So we're seeing a lot, really high lack of access among children, Hispanic, Black, and Native American populations across the region. We're also seeing that SNAP benefits are not as widely used as they could be. And when I say SNAP, I mean food bucks and food stamps. Based on income eligibility, there are a lot of people that are just barely over the line, including a lot of folks on Social Security, or who are struggling with lower income, but their income eligibility is too low. Also seeing that housing and utility costs are competing with money for food that is available in family budgets, and that there is a very, very strong interest in services that would teach residents where and how to grow and harvest their own food, which is exciting to see. So how can we provide more resources and education services for residents to do this? Next slide. So this is a map of food insecurity in northern Arizona, where it is shows the percent of eligible individuals that are not receiving SNAP benefits. So as you can see, this is really, really high. Where almost half of Yavapai County individuals that are eligible for SNAP are not getting it, either because they don't know how, or the process is too difficult, or a variety of other factors. And that's followed not too far behind by Mojave and Coconino County, and then Navajo County and Apache County, where there are really high levels of between a third and a half of community members in these counties are eligible for SNAP but don't know how to get it. And so a lot of this other data is from the Flagstaff Family Food Center, where 13% of the population of Flagstaff, about half of Flagstaff Family Food Center's clients, are accessing food at the food center, followed, and then we have Tuba City, about 15%, Winslow at 16%, Blewup, they are serving 73% of the population with food donations from Flagstaff Family Food Center. And then in Pinion, a third of their population is receiving support from Flagstaff Family Food Center. And so there's a really big gap of people who are facing food insecurity. More than 20,000 individuals in Coconino County are facing food insecurity, which is about 14.4%. And even more shocking is the number of children in Coconino County that are food insecure. About 5,500 children, 19% of children are dealing with food insecurity. And so there's a really big need for addressing this, which is why we did the community food systems assessment and policy. Next slide. And so this is just more data from the Flagstaff Family Food Center, where they're seeing a huge uptick in the numbers of meals that they're needing to serve and the number of households that are needing to serve. And there is a huge increase after COVID as well. And in 2023, it really shot up when the COVID financial support for COVID for the food banks ended. And they had to do a lot more, and a lot of families that were really on the brink of food insecurity just below that line. Next slide. And so when they were doing research on what the community was looking for, what does food security look like to you? It was the ability to cook, the ability to have healthy foods, just to have enough, to be able to plan ahead, growing your own food, having your own fresh food supply, having the time and money to purchase and cook, balance, and healthy meals were really huge priorities for what people wanted to see with future food security. Next slide. And then the barriers that exist to prevent them from getting there is time, expiration dates, what type of food is available, if it's within their dietary restrictions, if it's healthy, tools, employment, people to make money, how expensive stuff is, housing, transportation. There's a lot of different things that go into it. And vegetables, a lot of people really want to eat healthy, but it's too expensive. And they're looking for more programs where they can connect with local farmers and growers. Next slide. And so this is another map that shows the low income, low access areas are in blue, and the bubbles, the bigger the bubble, the more food access locations there are. And so Flagstaff and Prescott and Kingman are really huge hubs for food access, and all of these more rural, low income areas do not really have much at all. And what they do have is spread really far apart, and they're very far from these distribution centers. So as a city, what can we do to help support these community members who are coming into Flagstaff for support for food. Next slide. And then this one goes into overall food insecurity in Northern Arizona and childhood food insecurity. So going into more of those statistics, where 14 to 24% of children are food insecure across these different counties, which is higher than overall food insecurity, which is not great to see. So what can we do to do more food distribution and healthy foods in schools and among youth? Next slide. And that is everything. Sorry, I talked at you for a long time. I really appreciate you listening. You can scan this QR code here to view the report, and I can also drop it in the chat. If you all have any questions, if there is time, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Natalie. We do have time for questions. Anybody?
So are the SNAP standards set by the state, or does the local, so even though we have a higher cost of living than Maricopa, Arizona, for instance, we have the same income qualifications?
Yeah, there is a lot of different resources that are able to provide better for folks in the valley in southern and central Arizona that don't do as much to support us up here in northern Arizona. And so there are also a lot of state restrictions statewide that make advancing these issues difficult as a city and a county. And so working to eventually address those is something that would be important to do. It's just a matter of how and the right people to talk to. Great question.
This is your report out year. But I'm wondering if you are looking forward to any potential solutions to the food insecurity challenges in Northern Arizona with your team. Like, have you been brainstorming? Well, what's the next step to start addressing these issues?
Excellent question. And that reminds me that there's a key data point I forgot to include. In phase 2, we are engaging in community conversations. We're hosting 6 of them throughout the communities to reach those community members who are really struggling with food security and their voices aren't often heard. So we're hosting community conversations in Sunnyside and Southside, La Plaza Vieja, with young adults and with seniors and with Indigenous community members, and trying to create more intimate conversation spaces that are welcoming and safe, where they feel comfortable sharing the barriers that they're facing and their input and suggestions for how to make them better. And so that is the step we're in now. We're learning quite a bit from these. After this, we're going to take what we've learned and gain more insight from some stakeholder meetings. And we're hosting a collaborative event with the Climate Resilience Project to speak to this assessment and its findings and host more conversations on what can we do together as a community to grow a sustainable, equitable, and resilient food systems, and what steps do we want to prioritize with that. And so some key findings that we found already is, can we get some greenhouses around town where we can be really innovative and have some vertical growing so that we can grow more food, healthy foods for our senior centers, for the food kitchens, for our schools, and for folks that are eligible for SNAP and just above that line too, since it's not enough. Can we create a community kitchen or a food hub or a food co-op? Is there more we can do to support land and water access and growing spaces for community members who don't have that at home? So those are some of the big things that we're seeing right now. And people just really want to connect with each other and just learn more about these resources. So how can we better communicate what is already happening and communicate with folks who don't know what's already happening or would like to see?
Commissioner Metzger has a question. She said, does the city provide support through the water department for people growing their own food? And is it possible to provide billing differentiation for homes growing their own foods?
That is an excellent question that I do not know how to answer, but I can look into it and try to get back to it. Thank you.
Within the research that you did, do you find that the city feels siloed from the university's efforts for food recovery, or do you find that there is kind of a collaborative initiative going on, right? Like with Louis Covered and the Food Recovery Network and the CARES team at NAU. I just, you know, we always kind of think about this disconnect between what the university is doing, and what the city's doing. And I know a bunch of students took your survey for this came out, so I didn't know if you like had them check off if they were students or
We did.
parse step part any of that data.
Yeah, excellent question, and you're right that there is a need for more collaboration between the university and the city. And I think part of why we haven't collaborated much on food recovery just yet is because we haven't had the capacity to do anything on our end. We have the residential food scrap drop-off programs, and we have community compost sites at our gardens. But beyond that, we haven't really had the ability to or capacity to dive into food recovery on a larger scale. But I guess little teaser is we were really fortunate to just hire someone, Casey, who's actually on the call, just started this week as our new waste reduction supervisor, and will hopefully be able to help us grow projects like food recovery in the future and work more with the university because that's essential for making this work.
Yeah, how much of the waste do you think is prepared foods versus, not been prepared yet, just expired or whatever?
Excellent question, and I do have a slide on that and another presentation, but that was like very, very long. So I wasn't able to cover it today, but we did back in 2019 kind of do an assessment of where most of our food waste is coming from, and I think there is a little difference between prepared food, over-prepared foods, and foods that are going selling out at the stores that they can't sell. You can look at that graph real quick and get back to those stats.
Just curious.
Good question, because that's something important to know if we want to build this up further. Well, thank you all so much. I appreciate your time, and my email is right here if you have any questions in the future, and I will be sure to put it in the meeting chat as well for future reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Next on our agenda is a recycling update from Nicole. If you're available, Nicole.
I am, thank you. And I'll just do a very quick update. And it was fortunate that Ward came because we can tie in a couple things about his comments as well, since this is on the agenda. But we did have a nice meeting with the internal partners in solid waste, and they will be coming, and Tia, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we will have them at a commission meeting either, I believe we identified the month of September, to really talk through the state of the recycling situation in Flagstaff, and then also the backdrop of the national and global markets, which frankly have been incredibly volatile and are unfortunately losing money, making the economic models difficult for recycling. So we are not sure who will be presenting. It might be Sam Beckett, and it may be a new solid waste director, depending on how their interviews proceed. With that in mind, as you heard from Natalie, we have a new staff person, our waste prevention and food systems coordinator supervisor. Casey will be joining us in that discussion, and we'll talk a lot about just the conditions of the geographic isolation of Flagstaff, the global market, as I mentioned, and then we'll shift into the contract that the city currently is in with Friedman, and then our work to focus on waste prevention in general. With that in mind, I did want to just throw in there again, because this was on the agenda, I can just throw in a little note. Ward had very, very astutely commented on what about our short-term rentals. We do have a short-term rental sustainability guide that we distribute to short-term rental owners who sign up for a sales license with the city. And so we do have information that we send out through the emails that we get for folks who do sign up their short-term rentals. Not everyone does. And when we piloted the program, we had a handful of folks who agreed to test out our initiative. And I think we have a great opportunity with Casey being on board to revisit and reintroduce that short-term rental guide to reduce waste and also have a much heavier emphasis on waste prevention with our visitors. So more to come there, and really thankful that Ward brought that up because it's an incredibly important element of the recycling discussion. Great. That's all I have. Just a quick update and appreciate it. And again, apologies that I wasn't able to get back in time for the meeting. I'm actually charging here in Cordes Junction right now. So appreciate you all.
Thanks, Nicole.
You bet.
Okay, neighborhood sustainability grant updates from Tia. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so 4 updates, check-in points. Just wanted to share about what outreach has been done so far and what is to come, and then let everyone know about the upcoming workshop and support hours, and then do a little budget check-in, and then talk about what's to come for the review committee once we get all the applications in and start the review process. So outreach update, this is what has already been started because the grant opened last Thursday, a week ago. Targeted emails, flyering. Roger, do you want to say a little bit about some of the flyering that you've done around town?
Well, I got a list of places I should post flyers from Tia, and I think they're pretty much all done. So,
Yeah,
all the flyering. I started asking the bicycle because I go to so many bicycle shops, and almost all of them are interested. They don't all have a bulletin board, but they often just post a flyer like that either in the window or on their cash register board or something like that. So,
nice.
So
do they need more flyers, or did they get them? Or?
Oh no, I still have a couple in Spanish. I think I am out of English ones. I noticed that the downstairs lobby didn't have any. They're right here at City Hall, but now they do.
Thank you.
So,
yeah.
What else? I think the garden shops. My wife told me, why aren't you asking Warner's or wherever else? And I said, oh, well, good, I will. So there's still a few other options that I might hit. But as far as the ones that were suggested and on the little Excel spreadsheet, and they're all done.
Cool. Yeah, it'll be nice to update that for next year as well. And then Commissioner Metzger was able to table last Saturday. I don't know if she wants to add any comments in the chat or over Teams about how that went. No worries if not, but. And then we have, the website's been updated, press release, which got picked up by AZ Daily Sun, and I think some other websites. I spoke at Radio Sunnyside on Monday, social media posts. The grant workshop has been added to community calendars and Facebook event, and then paper applications and flyers have been distributed at the libraries. Some of the upcoming outreach items, which I'm sure I'm forgetting something on both of these. Public comment to council this coming Monday. They're coming back from their recess, and then we have our workshop, which I'll talk more about in the next slide on next Tuesday. I'm going to be tabling with Amy, Chair Wolfolinsky, this Saturday, and then Tom is going to be tabling with another staff member on August 31st.
I'm gonna be seeking out some other possible radio interviews. Did one with CAF last year, which was really fun. More social media, continued targeted emails, and then more virtual grant support hours. So a little bit more about the workshop and info session. Again, it's next Tuesday, August 27th, from 5:30 to 7 at the downtown community library room and virtually. Commissioner Conkle is going to be there to assist, but all are welcome to attend in person or virtually. We've got 14 people registered so far. That's optional, but it helps us collect data about how they heard about the workshop, if they need any accommodations, and then like helps me send reminders to them. And it's also a workshop presentation in partnership with Beautification and Action Grant. And then we have virtual support hours over Microsoft Teams throughout September. Commissioner Conkle is also helping with the one on Thursday, September 12th from 12 to 2 p.m. But then I've set up these other times once a week throughout the 5 weeks of September up until the night of submission. So if anyone else is interested, I didn't have the time to run these times by other people, so totally optional, but yeah, all you do is open up the Teams meeting. People do have the option to sign up through Calendly beforehand, but that is optional. It just helps me send reminders again. And but all the information is on our website, which has been revised and looks a lot cleaner now. And then I know we all talked about hopefully doing at least one in-person support tabling at the library. And Roger expressed interest in helping me with that. So TBD on that. Still got to organize it, but library staff said we could do it. So, all right, budget. So I have talked to Nicole, and we would like to reserve up to $1,000 of this year's neighborhood sustainability grant budget, which is $75,000 in total, to apply towards the implementation of support of our equity goals this year. What this means in reality for a grant project would mean that possibly, for example, a project on the line or the last 2 projects on the line might get a slight reduction in their kind of proposed budget. We have done this previously. These costs would help cover the cost for translation services. We already have one existing invoice, and we are really hoping for more invoices to come in because that means we got a Spanish language application in. And then also possibly providing stipends to eligible community members who join the review panel, because we're seeking to expand the review panel. So, I mean, if they're like a commissioner that we're asking, they wouldn't be eligible to get a stipend, but other community members would be eligible to do that. And then lastly, we would know at the time of the final vote and scoring in late November or early December if we use those funds or not. So that will be helpful information to know going into that meeting about what decisions about the budget need to be made. And then just know that for the upcoming budget cycle, we are planning on definitely asking for more funding for this. We didn't hit the cycle right this time, but before finalizing this decision, I wanted to check with you all if you have any concerns that we should take into consideration.
I think it's great. Let's say we have 5 or 6 Spanish language applications, but like what happens if you hit the 1,000 and then you don't have any more money to pay a translator? I'm assuming that's probably not going to happen, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah, it would probably go over that. Yeah. I don't know. I guess the options would be come back to you all and say, hey, we need to pull some more money, or if we look at our budget again and can see if there's other options. So yeah, you definitely find the money to translate them.
Yeah, you wouldn't like cut someone off and say we don't have any more money to translate more.
No, definitely that would not be an option on the table. Yeah.
Are you able to bucket money and roll it over? I mean, if we just allocated a whole grant to, that and assume future years,
Oh, for next budget year or,
Go for this one or the next one or the next one. So for instance, if we built a slush fund of 7,500, then we know we would have enough for, the next 2 or 3 years to cover the costs of administering, of marketing, of, getting it out. I just don't know if that's possible in the government, but.
yeah, ideally, we try not to carry forward funds as much as possible, only unless we have to.
Is it a use it or lose it deal?
Most of the time, yeah, especially for this program. But that, yeah, we'll probably have to have another discussion about, like, and this is something staff will do, is how much money do we want to like make the whole pot bigger, which yes, probably. And then within that, how much can go to equity, this equity piece. So.
Commissioner Metzger pointed out that there are organizations that do volunteer translations like the Literacy Center. And she said she knows some people who are bilingual who could translate.
Okay. Yeah, I think at this time, it's one of our goals to be compensating those people for their time and their work. I think we can pay people. So yeah, and until that becomes a barrier that we can't pay people, then I feel like staff are most comfortable with moving forward with compensating people for that work. But it's really good to have in our back pocket as those options. Yeah, thank you.
Do you have an idea how much more funding you're thinking of asking for the next budget cycle?
We went like 100K. They're trying to get to that, so 25K more. Whether that would include the equity portion or that would be extra, I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. Quick chat about the review and scoring process. So just a reminder that applications are due on September 30th. Also, I realized I was looking through my emails. I didn't send you all my big announcement email last Thursday and the hecticness of everything. And so I sent you all that today. So please share that out with your networks. Thank you. And then I get about a week to kind of compile those and put your names in to see who's scoring what. And then we'll get those out to you by October 6th. And then you have about a month to do your first initial review and then send me back questions, which I have a question about the answer here at the bottom. And then we typically do the final scores at our combined November-December meeting. So first question is, how many people should review each application? It used to be that everyone reviewed them all. That was when there were fewer. Then last year, each application was reviewed by at least 3 people. I kind of felt like it ended up being maybe too few, just because I feel like we got to the final scoring meeting, and if there were absences, it was hard for that person to come to that conversation. And so if there was kind of a delta in a score, it was hard to have that discussion, just in case someone is out with life. But I want to have that discussion with
How
you.
many applications came in last year?
So I think everyone scored like 12 to 14 or so.
How long did it take to go through one?
If they're good, doesn't take as long. Right, like if they're more challenging to review, it takes longer to figure it back in there. 30 minutes to an hour per application. We might. I'm comfortable with 3 people. Okay. 3 is pretty standard for grant reviews in general.
So maybe, if we did do that, maybe I just try to be more proactive about if there are deltas with the score, if they're too big, trying to, I don't know. But
Will the grants be available in a repository somewhere where you can look at any of them besides the ones that you're assigned or whatever?
Commissioner Metzger said she read over the minimum number. She does think it may help to have everyone read the applications, but not necessarily score them. Reading was easy, but scoring.
I personally don't think I have time to read 30 to 40 applications. So.
Yeah, I agree. I really love the thought of that, but I'm not sure I have the bandwidth for that.
I don't think I have that much coffee.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to go, I've never done anything like that, so. I'll go with their experience and agree to that, I think. I mean, I'll probably, if they're available and I get bored, I'll just start reading some of the other ones, but, you know.
Okay, sounds good. Then expect that if there's significantly large differences in scores, that I might be following up with you, just before the meeting to, not while we're in the meeting, but, just to.
I agree.
Okay, cool. And then is there any certain types of support that would be helpful for new or returning commissioners? Trainings, about the scoring and evaluation process in September, and or just I can prepare documents before I'll have to be doing anyways for expanding the review.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind going through one with the rubric with somebody that's done it and just to kind of see the process and methodology.
Yeah.
Even an old one that's already been scored, practice on, that or.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll see if we can add it to the September agenda. And then quick, the one overtime, the question phase, right now, reviewers can ask the applicant questions. And I just want to help us set expectations and boundaries about what are those questions? Like, what are the key questions that when you're reading the application, you're like, hey, I need to know this to be able to feel like we can fund this project. And maybe you two can help from last year's examples. What are some of those and previous years key questions that you should be looking for in that review process? And we can also add this to the agenda next time.
Questions that are off limits.
I mean, I don't think you have to feel like you have to ask the question to every application.
Yeah.
Right, this is, like Tia said, if I'm questioning whether or not my ability to assess the application would depend on the answer to this question.
Totally.
You don't have to throw out a question just to do it.
One I remember from last year was permission to operate on specific property, things like that. Like, have you already had these conversations or got this permission, or whether or not you can grab the project depending on that.
Exactly. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Tia. Does anybody have any to and from? Anything to mention coming up, or requests for future agenda items?
I think doing a practice review together is always nice for new commissioners.
Yeah.
So like that could go in September.
Yeah, it wouldn't take too long.
So Tia, it's my understanding that we're gonna solicit or actually pay people to come and help with this review process. So they should be involved in this a little bit
That
of
would be
training.
true
Is
if
that
they're
right?
gonna,
Ideally,
should have them at the.
agreed.
Great.
And I think last time we did it, we sent out an application before the meeting and had everybody score it for the meeting and come with their scores and comments.
Oh, okay.
So that way, otherwise we're taking 40 minutes of a meeting to read and score.
Right.
Exactly.
So it'd be homework before the September meeting.
Oh, to do a practice application.
Right. And it would be one from last year that was in the middle, right? Not a super high scoring and not super high scoring.
Sounds great. Love that idea. Cool.
Did we do that this
No, I don't think so, but
that was my question.
Didn't know what was going on.
just for the record, I thought that your preparation of all the support documents, the Excel file, and your organization was really great last year. So much better this time. And it will be easier if we go through. Thanks for that. Yep, cool. I think we're done anyway. Do you want to make a motion to adjourn?
Let's adjourn.
I motion we adjourn.
Second.
All right.
Thanks,
Everybody.
Good to see you.
Thank you.